On this week's NESN Patriots podcast, we break down what went wrong in another embarrassing loss for New England and discuss whether there's any path forward for Bill Belichick, Mac Jones, and the rest of these reeling Patriots. Hello and welcome in to the NESN Patriots podcast. My name is Zach Cox, joined as always by Dakota Randall. And wow, I honestly don't even know where to start with this Patriots team at this point. Patriots lost 38-3 to the Dallas Cowboys last week, which was their worst loss of the Bill Belichick era. And they followed that up yesterday with the second worst loss of the Bill Belichick era, 34-0 against a pretty mediocre New Orleans Saints team at home at Gillette Stadium. They're 1-4 for the first time since 2000. There are a lot of pretty eye-popping numbers and stats that we can get into as the episode goes along here. But Dakota, just coming out of that game yesterday, we both watched it together in the press box. What were you feeling about this team? What is your kind of big picture outlook on just where the Patriots are as a franchise right now?
Yeah, I think we're all kind
tough,
of
right?
I think we're all at a loss for words. I do think, it's tough because in most cases like this, the obvious answer would be a change of quarterback and or a change of head coach. But I just don't know what that's going to do. I don't know. I don't think they have any better internal or external options at quarterback. I know you wrote about this last night, and then I still don't think. I don't know what firing Bill Belichick solves, and I just would be stunned if they even do it, just because I think he has earned the right to, see it through the season and avoid the look of being fired mid-season. I mean, unless he agreed to step down and it was his idea, which I can't see happening. I think at worst he deserves the mutually parted ways in the offseason treatment. So I just don't know. I think if they lose this weekend against the Raiders, all bets are off. Maybe something drastic happens, but I also could see it just kind of staying this way for the rest of the season. And my second thought is just that, I think it's too bad to put it lightly, just because, the further we get into this season, the Patriots schedule, which once seemed so daunting, I no longer think it really is. Of their 12 games remaining, 6 are against teams with records of 500 or worse. And the teams with the winning records two of them are the Steelers and the Colts, who I think stink too. So I think, there was a path here for the Patriots to genuinely exceed expectations and get to that sort of 10-win number that we talked about to get into the playoffs. But now that just seems like it's so far away and impossible.
One of the craziest things to me too is just how quickly this has devolved. Obviously the Patriots kind of downfall from Super Bowl contender status has been ongoing for several years now, but we were talking on the show, might have been even last week or 2 weeks ago, that the Patriots, even though they're obviously in a different place than they were at the height of the Tom Brady era or even the end of the Tom Brady era, they looked like a team that was talented and well coached enough to at least be in every game. You go back to what they did in weeks 1 and 2 this season. You could make the argument that they should have won both of those first 2 games against the Eagles and the Dolphins, 2 teams that now are a combined 9-1 on the season. Obviously there were some self-inflicted errors on the Patriots in both of those games. But when Matthew Judon came up to the podium after the Dolphins game in week 2 and pretty confidently said, this is not a bad team. We're making mistakes. We're shooting ourselves in the foot, but this is not a bad team and we're going to fix this. You heard that and you said, okay, yeah, that makes sense. That seemed like a valid assessment of where the Patriots are. And it's less than a month later, and they now look like one of the worst teams in the NFL. It's hard to argue at this point that they aren't a bad team when you come out and get beaten 72-3 over a 2-game span. They've allowed 69 unanswered points. They haven't scored a touchdown in 10 quarters. Their offense, by basically every metric, is one of, if not the worst in the entire NFL. And their defense now doesn't have two of their best playmakers in Judon and Christian Gonzalez. And I think Devin McCourty put it pretty succinctly on the Sunday Night Football broadcast last night when he was asked about Bill Belichick saying that the Patriots need to start over now. He said, I don't know if it's going to look any better. That's the scary thing in New England right now. And it's a good point. I mean, I don't know what the path back for this team is. Even after those first 2 weeks, you say, all right, they shore up the right tackle spot. They stop committing these early game turnovers. Then they're probably going to have a chance. Right now, there's just so many problems and so many issues that it's difficult to even say, okay, they need to do X, Y, Z, and then they'll at least be back to respectability.
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is figuring things out on the offensive line. You know, like when Bill Belichick talked last night about restarting things, or, you know, that whole stuff, that whole talking point, I feel like what it entails is, you know, they can't do anything that they want on offense. They can't do any of the Bill O'Brien stuff that they wanted to do. They can't do these RPOs. They can't do these play actions. They can't do any sort of downfield passing game. They can't do any of it until they figure out how to block up front, whether that be for the run or for the pass. Nothing's going to get better until that sorts itself out. And so I feel like it just, I don't know if Adrian Clem could be on the chopping block this week, or, I mean, when Belichick has been asked about potential coaching changes, he's been vague to the point where, like, why wouldn't you just say no coaching changes? So I wonder if something could come. Not to say it's all Adrian Clem's fault, but the offensive line has been horrible, right? And I just think it starts there. And if that doesn't get fixed, I mean, it was 2.5 yards per carry again. Ramondre Stevenson's like third worst in the NFL in yards per carry. You know, it's a complete disaster up front. So I don't know. And the more I think about it too, like, it's just talking about how you mentioned the drop off and how they've sort of fallen off the cliff here. You know, on one hand, it feels like they've been a house of cards for a while. And maybe the first card, or, you know, the most meaningful card was pulled in that Cowboys game. Like, whatever confidence they had left as a team just got completely removed that day. But really, like, you could make the argument that they haven't responded or bounced back since getting, like, punched in the mouth by the Colts in Mac Jones' rookie year. I mean, it's been since then, right? They went on that 7-game winning streak. We're like, wow, the Patriots are back going to the playoffs. They lost that game. They followed it up with a bad loss to the Bills. They mixed in that blowout of the Jaguars, but then, you know, they lost to the Dolphins in the season, got blown out in the playoffs. Last year happened, and now they're 1-5. It's like, ever since that day against Indy, it's just been a complete downward slope. And then, to your point, it's hit a cliff now, and it's just completely fallen off.
I think even in the first 2 games this season, though, it's like, obviously they didn't get wins out of them, but you saw the fight and the response and the comeback that just hasn't been there in these last 2 games. I mean, the Patriots trailed by double digits in the first half of both of those games against very good teams, and they were able to get to a point where at the end of the game, they had a chance, they had the ball with a chance to either win or tie. In these last 2 games, it's just been early turnovers, early deficits, and then they just completely fall apart. I mean, they were bad offensively yesterday. They were bad defensively. The Saints didn't even really play especially well in this game. I thought Derek Carr was pretty shaky. He had a lot of open receivers that he just missed. But the Patriots weren't able to capitalize. They haven't been able to force the turnovers on that side of the ball to kind of prop up their offense, which I think has been an underrated storyline this season. Obviously, the offense has received justifiably most of the attention and the scrutiny, but Patriots haven't forced a turnover in 3 weeks. They only have 2 on the season. The only team in the NFL, I believe, with fewer is the Raiders, who don't play their 5th game until tonight. So it's certainly another factor in these teams' struggles this year. And then on special teams, I mean, we were talking about this yesterday. It seemed like there was a glimmer of improvement earlier this year with the Brendan Schooler block and some of the kind of strides they were appearing to make. But they've been bad there in the last couple of weeks as well. Chad Ryland has only hit 50% of his field goals. Joe Cardona is suddenly just all over the place with his snaps. You wonder whether he's dealing with some sort of unreported injury there. The Patriots also, I think Matthew Slater had 2 penalties on special teams yesterday.
Yeah, you know, things
Jabril
are going
Peppers
bad
muffed a
Matthew
punt.
Slater as to penalties.
Yeah, it's just all around bad right now for the Patriots, which goes back to the point of it's hard to chart a path forward for this team.
Yeah, I think it's true. The special teams are just as bad as they were last year. Like, it's the same thing where it's like 3 or 4 plays per game where it's just boneheaded. And so that hasn't gotten any better. But I know they looked decent. The offense looked decent in the first 2 weeks, but the further we get away from it, you wonder if that was just early season. The book wasn't quite out yet on the Patriots. Whereas, like their shortcomings in those games felt like unforced errors, whereas now it feels like the defenses are actually taking it to them. Like the film's out there now. The other teams, the Cowboys, the Jets, the Saints saw what the Patriots wanted to do and, kind of were able to do the first 2 weeks, but really now everyone realizes you don't have to do too much to shut them down. And, I just don't think the Patriots have any answers. Because I still think there's a way there's a scenario in which the offensive line improves, but there's no help coming from the receivers of the pass catching group at this point. Like I just don't. They don't have anybody to throw the ball to. Yeah. I think we've talked about it so much that we've started to just like leave it to the side. But I don't think you can, point out enough the drop off from Jacoby Myers to Juju Smith-Schuster. It's been that bad. I think Juju still only has 86 yards in the season. He hasn't eclipsed 100. And to that end, quick stat, the Patriots' top receiver this year is Kendrick Bourne with 18 catches for 218 yards. After that, number 2 is Hunter Henry with 17 for 176. Jacoby Myers in 3 games, really 2.5, because he got hurt late in one of those games. So he's missed 1 game, hasn't played yet this week. He's got 18.
And he had a third string or a backup rookie quarterback for one of those games too.
Yes, exactly. So he has 18 for 199. So that would almost be leading the Patriots. Nelson Aguilar has 14 for 170. That is more than Juju Smith-Schuster and Devontae Parker. Jonnu Smith would be leading the Patriots in both catches and receiving yards with 21 catches for 246 yards. So at some point you start to wonder if, the Patriots are the bad roommate, to borrow a phrase.
You want some more stats here? The top 6 receiving performances this year when you combine the Patriots wideouts and DeAndre Hopkins. Number 1, Hopkins, 140 yards. Number 2, Hopkins, 65 yards. Number 3, Kendrick Bourne, 64 yards. Number 4, Hopkins, 63 yards. Number 5, Devontae Parker, 57 yards. Number 6, Hopkins, 48 yards. So there seemed like, I know you wrote about this a couple weeks ago, but that seemed like a very clear fix for this Patriots receiving core that they obviously did not pursue. And I think overall still the mismanagement of the right tackle position is still the biggest misstep and the biggest kind of roster building error that's hurting them this year. But the swap from Jacoby Myers to Juju Smith-Schuster just could not have possibly gone worse so far. Juju Smith-Schuster, I believe he had 3 catches for 6 yards yesterday before he ended up leaving the game with a head injury. Demario Douglas also left the game with a head injury. Given players' normal recovery timetables from concussions, it seems like there's a good chance that one or both of those players will be unavailable this week as well. It's just Mac Jones doesn't have anybody to throw to on those kind of key gotta have it third down scenarios. Obviously, that is what Jacoby Myers was for this team for so long. The Patriots are going to see Jacoby Myers this week when they play the Raiders. If he ends up having 10 catches for 120 yards and a touchdown from Jimmy Garoppolo, it's just going to look all the worse for this Patriots team. And I understood what they were trying to do with that move. It made sense in theory to kind of move out a player who seemingly had hit his ceiling in the Patriots offense and try to swap him out for somebody that had a little bit more explosiveness, a little bit more playmaking, run after the catch ability. It made sense at the time, but Smith-Schuster just has not been the same player, and he's been essentially a non-factor, if not an outright negative in this offense so far. And as we mentioned, that lack of receiver talent is just really holding back what the Patriots can do in the passing game.
Well, that and Mike Gesicki hasn't been able to get anything going this year, and I think a lot of that is because the Patriots they signed him, so they obviously brought in Bill O'Brien. So we talked a lot about they were going to go back to these 2 tight end sets, and I think they've tried to do that. They'd like to do that, but the reality is they can't block anything, so they have to leave one or both of those guys in sometimes to help with blocking. So they haven't really been able to use this 2 tight end attack the way they'd probably like to. I think Gesicki would be a good target on some of those third downs. but he's been reduced to very little role at all. He had saw 30% of the snaps yesterday. The season high was 72 in week 2, but really he just hasn't played all that much.
And he's not a blocker too.
No, he's
He's
not a
just,
blocker, right?
yeah.
Right. So and Hunter Henry isn't a good blocker either. So they usually have to have him help out with blocking sometimes. So they just really haven't been able to get this 2 tight end attack going because one of them typically has to help out with blocking. So it's just an all around mess. It kind of starts with the offensive line and it all falls off from there.
Yeah, and obviously another angle of this is the quarterback play. Mac Jones has been benched or removed from the game, however you want to define it, in each of the last 2 games. He has not played a snap in the fourth quarter since the Jets game back in week 3. It's difficult to kind of evaluate and talk about this situation because all of the factors that we just mentioned are clearly hurting Mac Jones this season. The O-line can't block. The receivers can't get open. It's tough to play quarterback under those circumstances. That said, Mac Jones also has not played well in these last 2 games. I thought he was probably better in this game than he was against the Cowboys. I would say
he bounced back better from the tough start.
He did, but he had another tough start. He threw the pick 6 early. The second interception wasn't his fault. That one bounced right off Ty Montgomery's hands. There was the bad miscommunication with Ramondre Stevenson on the pitch that went for the fumble. So it was another uninspiring performance from Jones. I would say he only finished with 110 passing yards, but I've heard the you got to bench Jones after a game like this chatter. Again, that makes sense. That has some merit. I mean, he's turned the ball over 6 times in the last 2 games, and 3 of those have resulted directly in defensive touchdowns. But I haven't seen anything from Bailey Zappi that makes me think he would be a better option for the Patriots. He's completed less than 40% of his passes in these 2 relief appearances. He really struggled in training camp in the preseason to the point where obviously the Patriots cut him and were okay with exposing him to waivers and letting any other team sign him. That didn't happen, and he ended up back on the team. But they've also been cycling through this parade of third string quarterbacks to really seemingly trying to find a kind of an upgrade over Bailey Zappi as that number 2 quarterback. So I don't think he's a guy that they can just say, all right, cool, Bailey, it's your turn, carry this team. Maybe they will, but I don't know. They seem to be in a spot where they don't have any good option at quarterback, especially with all the other nonsense surrounding that offense.
Yeah, no, and I mean, I think you could make the case that if they did just want to, like, let's say either they wanted to tank, which is they're not, that's a stupid thing to even talk about, but let's say they wanted to tank, or they just, they're gonna move on from Jones and just they want to see what they have at the other quarterback positions. I can make a case for going with Will Grier instead of Bailey Zappi, because I think what you have in Bailey Zappi, and that is a fringe like a ceiling of a decent backup. Whereas Will Grier, like, maybe has starting ability, or at least see if he could be your backup quarterback of the future. That's where you could get at, is like, you don't have an actual like quarterback competition midseason, you have a backup quarterback competition midseason, which would be kind of a tank, I guess, in some sense of the word. And I do think that is going to be a really interesting sidebar as we get deeper into the season, is if this prolongs and the Patriots are 2-9 at some point or something, what are we talking about for a draft pick? I think that's a huge storyline, and I think really it comes down to that no matter what, wherever they are in that first round, it has to be tackle, receiver, or quarterback. But I think you could craft a case for Marvin Harrison instead of a quarterback if you can't get Caleb Williams. I know I'm going on a different tangent here, but I think that's kind of where we're getting to at this point, because the season looks like it might be over.
Yeah, it's incredible to be having these conversations in early October with 12 games left in the season. I think 11 games, 12 games.
12 winnable games. Again, I can't, like, I'm serious about that. Like, I think if this Patriots team was good, like, you could absolutely like talk yourself into them winning any of these remaining games. All the teams left in the schedule look vulnerable, including the Chiefs, and everyone else in the division. It's just the Patriots are that bad.
Yeah, I'm pulling up the the Patriots schedule right now, there are a lot of winnable games left on this schedule, but this, I know you wrote about this morning, this Raiders game this weekend kind of feels like a last stand sort of situation. Because if you lose this game against a very beatable Raiders team, you fall to 1-5 on the season. Playoffs are essentially out of the question at that point, if they're not already. Then you have Bills, Dolphins back to back. That's a very realistic 1-7 or 2-6 type situation. And as this season kind of continues to spiral, if it does continue to spiral, you've got to wonder, I know we touched on this earlier, just when will Robert Kraft reach his breaking point with this? I mean, he has come out and said in no uncertain terms in each of the last 2 off seasons that he expects the Patriots to be back in the playoffs and back winning playoff games. It does not appear like that is going to happen this season. And if the Patriots aren't in the playoffs, if they extend that streak of seasons without a playoff win to 5, and they're losing in embarrassing fashion like this, I just wonder how long it's going to be before something happens behind the scenes. I'm with you with what you said earlier. I don't think I would be surprised if something happened during the season, if a move like that was made. But I mean, if they lose to the Raiders and then they get killed by the Bills, and then they have to go down to Miami where they've never played well, if this team is bottom of the NFL around mid-season, I don't know. I don't know what would happen if the Patriots found themselves in that scenario.
Yeah, I mean, I need to recalibrate myself because I picked the Patriots the first 5 weeks of the season. I picked them in every week, so I've had to.
I thought they were a good team until a week ago. It's crazy how quickly it's all fallen apart.
I don't think I was crazy for picking them in any of those weeks.
No.
Now it's like, and I look at this week and I'm like, well, the Raiders have one of the worst defenses in football. Like, this should be a get right opportunity, but it's like the Patriots are so middling and dependent on everything being perfect that I'm like, if they don't have Demario Douglas, I don't know if they win this game. Like, that's where they're at. Like, if they don't have the 6th-round rookie who barely has played this year, I don't know how they do. And that, the Raiders offense isn't that great. I mean, they haven't even scored more than 20 points this season, but the Patriots are dealing with big injuries on defense. Like, this game is losable, even though they should win. And it's interesting that if the Raiders lose tonight to the Packers, they'll be 1-4 as well. And like Belichick and McDaniels both could be coaching for their jobs next Sunday.
It's a loser leaves town match.
Yeah. And so the only way I can see like a loss this weekend not resulting in more fire Bill or replace Mac talk is if like, and it's a super specific scenario. If the Patriots lose a shootout, and you just leave the game thinking, well, it's solely because of the injuries to Judon and Gonzalez that they lost that game. But like, even then, I think the Patriots should have enough on defense to limit the Raiders offense because it's not that good. So I think a loss this weekend would be that bad. And I just don't know how both Mac Jones and Bill Belichick can survive a 1-5 start. Like, I don't know how, but I think it just goes back to, I don't think they really have any other options.
Yeah. Bill Belichick did sort of foreshadow potential changes when we spoke with him this morning. Did not offer any specifics on that, but he said we need to make some improvements from where we are, which is obvious based on what they've put on the field so far in these last couple of weeks. We'll find out soon, maybe this afternoon, maybe Wednesday when the team returns to practice, what some of those changes might look like, whether there's a trade, whether there's some restructuring of the depth chart, whether there's some shuffling of the coaching staff. But it is clear that whatever the Patriots have been trying to do lately just is not working and seems to be not really resonating with the players the way it needs to be as well. I thought it was interesting to hear from Kendrick Bourne after the game last night. He basically just said, yeah, our effort needs to be better. We don't want it enough. We're not working hard enough. We're not trying hard enough. They're kind of generic comments, but I think when a player says we're not executing well enough, we're not doing our job well enough, that's sort of boilerplate after any loss. When he says our effort isn't good enough and we're not working hard enough and we don't want to win enough, that sort of sets off some alarm bells to me, because if the effort isn't there when this team was 3 weeks into the season and still had everything in front of them, what's the effort going to look like if they're sitting at 1-5, 2-6, 2-7, and there's still half the season left to go?
Yeah. So two things there. I think number one on Belichick, I one of the reasons I've said I don't think they should fire him midseason is because, he'd have to actively be hurting the team, like being a reason that they're losing beyond his GM abilities, losing the locker room, players tuning him out, that kind of thing. And while I don't quite know if that's happening, the reality is the Patriots have, in my opinion, and I really believe this, across the board, a better roster than what they had in 2021 when they went.
I agree with that.
When they went 10-7 with a rookie quarterback and made the playoffs. So what's changed? And to me, it's a combination of things. Maybe the message is growing stale. I mean, that has to reflect on the head coach, because the Patriots are younger and more talented. I mean, again, they're not one of the more talented teams in the AFC, but regardless, they're more talented. And they're younger and they're faster than they were in 2021, but they are appreciably worse. But the second part of that is, the further we get away from the Tom Brady years, and any sort of real success with the Patriots, you start to lose all remaining parts of the Patriot way, or this expectation of winning. The whole culture in New England, people say winning is contagious, but losing, I think, is worse. Winning is a cold, losing is COVID. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think if you're, I think losing can seep in and infect a franchise. It's a lot. It's a lot harder to keep up. To come in and expect to win and have that be the standard. But it's really easy to start losing and have that snowball and have players let go of the rope. And so there's a few players left from those Super Bowl teams, but a lot of these guys haven't experienced any winning since they've been with the Patriots. So there's no proof of concept for Bill Belichick's message or what he's been preaching, because it just hasn't turned into any results. And I think part of it is, it's a byproduct of drafting poorly for so long. You have a lot of players who aren't that good, that haven't had success here, that haven't won here. They haven't, and more so, they haven't really dealt with it, or they haven't responded from any adversity. Like, I think that's been the most jarring thing for me, is that the first sign of adversity, this team kind of crumbled. And they just haven't shown an ability to respond. So I think it's poor drafting. It's sort of an erosion of the whole Patriots culture and expectations for winning. And maybe all of that kind of has culminated in maybe not players tuning Bill Belichick out, but maybe never buying in the first place.
Yeah. Obviously, a very important week for the Patriots here as they prepare for their Sunday matchup with Josh McDaniels, Jimmy Garoppolo, Jacoby Myers, and the rest of the former Patriots out in Las Vegas. Dakota, any final thoughts here before we sign off?
Patriots 38, Raiders 13.
Get right game.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It's
we will see if the Patriots can live up to that prediction. As always, you can follow me on X at Zach Cox Nesson. You can follow Dakota at Dak Randall. Not Dak Randall Nesson, just Dak Randall. And you can follow along with all of our Patriots coverage, which surely is going to be wildly optimistic and sunshiny this week at NESN.com.